The silence in space was deadly. 12 giant warships floated helplessly in the black void, their powerful engines now cold and silent. These weren't just any ships. They belonged to the Volthek 7th Fleet, one of the most feared military forces in the galaxy. But right now they were nothing more than metal coffins drifting through space. Commander Hakrim stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching red warning lights flash across every screen. His heart sank as he read the reports coming in from all 12 ships. Life support was failing. The air was getting thinner. The temperature was dropping. 50,000 Valthek soldiers and crew members were slowly dying, and there was nothing he could do about it. The quantum cascade failure had been sudden and complete. One moment they were traveling faster than light toward their destination. The next moment, every engine in the fleet had simply stopped working. Their advanced technology, which had made them masters of space travel for centuries, had betrayed them in the worst possible way. "Sir, we're losing atmosphere on decks 7 through 12, reported his second-in-command, her voice tight with fear. "The backup systems are overloaded. We have maybe 6 hours before the first ships start losing life support completely." Hakrim closed his eyes. 6 hours. That wasn't enough time for a rescue fleet to reach them, even if they could send a distress signal. They were too far from Valthek space, floating in an unexplored region that most civilizations avoided. Meanwhile, millions of miles away, Captain Minho was having the time of his life. 3 days ago, he had launched from Earth aboard the exploration vessel New Dawn, leading humanity's boldest space mission yet. They were further from home than any human had ever traveled, pushing the boundaries of their still-developing space technology. Minho was studying star charts in his quarters when the communication officer burst through his door. "Captain, you need to hear this," she said, her face pale with excitement and fear. In the communications room, strange sounds filled the air. It wasn't music or voices. It was something else entirely. Mathematical patterns, repeating sequences, desperate electronic pulses that seemed to carry a message of urgency. "It's been going on for 10 minutes, the officer explained. "The patterns are too organized to be natural. This is definitely artificial, and it's coming from somewhere close by." Minho listened carefully. Even though he couldn't understand the alien signals, something about them made his blood run cold. The rhythm was wrong, too fast, too desperate. It reminded him of a heartbeat that was racing with panic. "This is a distress call," he said quietly. "Someone out there is in serious trouble." His crew gathered around him, their faces showing the same mix of excitement and terror that he felt. This was it. First contact with an alien species. But it wasn't happening the way anyone had imagined. Instead of a peaceful meeting, they were witnessing a tragedy unfolding in space. "Captain, we should report this to Earth Command," suggested his first officer. "This is way beyond our mission parameters. We're explorers, not a rescue team." Minho stared at the communication display, watching the alien signals grow weaker and more desperate with each passing minute. Somewhere out there in the darkness, people were dying. It didn't matter that they were aliens. They were still people, and they needed help. "Set course for the signal source," he ordered. "Maximum speed." "Sir, that's against protocol." "I don't care about protocol," Minho said firmly. "We're going to help them." Commander Hakrim couldn't believe what he was seeing on his screens. After hours of waiting for death in the cold void of space, something was actually coming toward them. But as the objects got closer, his confusion only grew deeper. "What are those things?" he muttered, staring at the approaching vessels. They looked nothing like any spaceship he had ever seen. Where Valthek ships were smooth, elegant, and built with perfect symmetry, these craft looked like someone had thrown together spare parts and somehow made them fly. The human ships had ugly welding marks visible on their hulls. Pieces of metal were bolted on in strange places. Some sections looked like they had been repaired with completely different materials. To Hakrim's trained eye, they appeared to be held together by hope and determination rather than proper engineering. "Sir, I'm reading their power signatures," called out his sensor operator, her voice filled with amazement. "These ships shouldn't be able to travel between stars. Their engines are so primitive, they should barely be able to leave their home planet's atmosphere." Hakrim shook his head in wonder. "Then how are they here?" On board the New Dawn, Captain E. Minho was having his own moment of shock. The alien fleet was massive beyond anything humans had ever built. Each of their ships was easily 10 times larger than his vessel, with smooth black hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect. The technology radiating from those ships was so advanced that his instruments could barely measure it. Lieutenant Ji-woo worked frantically at her station, trying to scan the alien vessels without triggering any defensive systems. "Captain, the energy readings from those ships are incredible. Their weapons could vaporize us without even trying. Their shields are stronger than anything in our databases, and their engines, I can't even figure out how they work." "How far ahead of us?" "Are they technologically?" Minho asked. Ji-woo paused her work and looked up at him with wide eyes. "Sir, comparing their technology to ours is like comparing a rocket ship to a stone wheel. They're not just ahead of us. They're in a completely different league." Minho felt a chill run down his spine. If these aliens wanted to destroy humanity, they could probably do it without breaking a sweat. Earth's entire space fleet wouldn't last 5 minutes against even one of these ships. But then he remembered something important. These aliens were the ones in trouble. They were drifting powerlessly, sending out distress signals. Whatever had gone wrong with their ships, they needed help. And right now, humans were the only ones close enough to provide it. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked his first officer nervously. "Should we try to communicate with them?" Minho looked at the massive alien fleet on his screen, then at his own small crude ship with its patched hull and jury-rigged systems. It was like a mouse offering to help a wounded lion. The situation was so ridiculous it was almost funny, but Minho had made his decision back when he first heard their distress call. It didn't matter how advanced these aliens were, or how primitive. Humans looked in comparison. People were dying, and that was all that mattered. "Open a communication channel," he ordered, "and prep the engineering teams. We're going to help them." His crew stared at him like he had lost his mind. Help them? With what? Their ships were so far beyond human technology that it seemed impossible. But Minho had faith in something the aliens might not understand: human determination and creativity. "Chief." Engineer Dongmin stepped through the airlock onto the alien flagship and immediately felt like he had walked into a dream. Everything around him was impossibly advanced. Walls that seemed to glow with their own light, control panels that responded to touch before fingers even made contact, and corridors that stretched further than his eyes could see. "This is incredible," whispered one of his team members, staring at a maintenance panel that displayed 3-dimensional holograms instead of simple readouts. "I don't even know where to begin understanding this stuff." Dongmin nodded, feeling overwhelmed himself. The Valthek technology was like nothing he had ever seen. Their engines operated on principles that human science was only beginning to theorize about. Their computer systems processed information faster than anything on Earth. Even their basic tools looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. But as he examined the failed systems more closely, Dongmin began to notice something interesting. Despite all the advanced technology, the basic problems were familiar. Power wasn't flowing where it needed to go. Cooling systems had overheated. Backup circuits had been overloaded. These were the same kinds of issues he had dealt with his entire career, just wrapped in alien packaging. "Okay, team, here's what we're going to do," he announced to his engineers. "I know this looks impossible, but underneath all this fancy stuff, these are still machines, and machines break down in predictable ways." The Valthek engineers watched in amazement as the humans began working. Instead of trying to understand the alien technology completely, they focused on the basic principles. When they couldn't figure out how a Valthek component worked, they bypassed it with human parts. When alien circuits were too damaged to repair, they created new pathways using copper wire and basic electronics. "You're using primitive materials to fix our quantum processors?" asked a bewildered Valthek engineer, watching Dongmin attach a simple human battery to an alien control system. "Sometimes the old ways work best," Dongmin replied with a grin. "We call it making do with what you have." Meanwhile, in the medical bay, Dr. Su-jin faced her own incredible challenge. The wounded Valthek crew members had blue blood instead of red, 3 hearts instead of 1, and internal organs arranged completely differently from humans. Her medical scanners couldn't even identify what they were looking at. But Su-jin had spent years working in emergency medicine. treating patients when she didn't have time to run proper tests or consult textbooks. She had learned to improvise, to make quick decisions based on limited information, and to adapt her techniques to unusual situations. "Their blood pressure is dropping," she told her team, monitoring a wounded Valthek officer. "I can't use human medicine on them, but I can see where they're losing fluid. Hand me that surgical tape." Working carefully, Sujin and her team began adapting human medical procedures to alien biology. They couldn't cure the Valthek crew members completely, but they could stabilize them, stop internal bleeding, and buy time for their own immune systems to heal. Commander Huck Rim walked through his ship, watching these strange human creatures work miracles with primitive tools and simple determination. What amazed him most wasn't their technical skills, though those were impressive. What truly shocked him was their attitude. The humans had risked their lives to reach the Valthek fleet. They were working around the clock to save alien strangers. They shared their food, their equipment, even their personal supplies without being asked. And when Hakrim tried to discuss payment or rewards, they just looked confused. "Why are you helping us?" he finally asked Captain Minho directly. Minho paused in his work and looked up with a puzzled expression. "Because you need help," he said simply. "Why else would we?" As the days turned into weeks, something unexpected began happening aboard the Valthek ships. What started as a simple rescue operation slowly transformed into the most fascinating cultural exchange in galactic history. Young Valthek engineer Bora had never seen anything like the humans before. In Valthek society, everything followed strict rules. Officers ate first, then lower ranks. Work assignments were distributed based on social status. Even conversations had formal protocols that everyone followed without question. But these humans seemed to ignore all such sensible structures. She watched in amazement as Captain Minho sat on the floor, sharing his lunch with a junior repair technician. They laughed together, told jokes, and treated each other like equals. This was completely backwards to everything Bora had been taught about proper civilization. "Don't your leaders demand respect?" she asked Communications Officer Jae-min during one of their work sessions. Jae-min looked puzzled. "Captain Minho gets plenty of respect, but that doesn't mean we can't be friends too. He's still human, just like the rest of us." This concept was revolutionary to Bora. In Valthek culture, those in power maintained distance from their subordinates. Friendship between different ranks was considered unprofessional and potentially dangerous to the chain of command. But as she observed, Bora noticed something interesting. The human crew worked harder and more efficiently than any Valthek team she had ever seen. They anticipated each other's needs, covered for each other's mistakes, and pushed themselves to exhaustion to help their alien rescuers. Their lack of rigid hierarchy seemed to make them stronger, not weaker. During their evening breaks, Jae-min would play human music for Bora. The sounds were strange at first. Emotional, chaotic, full of feeling rather than mathematical precision. Valthek music was composed according to strict formulas designed to promote productivity and maintain social order. Human music seemed designed only to make people feel things. "This song is about love," Jae-min explained, playing a gentle melody. "It's about two people who care for each other more than themselves." "But why would someone care more about another person than themselves?" Bora asked, genuinely confused. "That's illogical. Self-preservation is the foundation of survival," Jae-min smiled. "Maybe that's why humans help strangers in space. Sometimes caring about others is more important than logic." In return, Bora taught Jae-min about Valthek mathematics and science. She showed him how their quantum computers could solve equations that would take human machines years to complete. She explained how their society had eliminated waste and inefficiency through careful planning and strict social structures. But as she talked about Valthek achievements, Bora found herself making uncomfortable comparisons. Yes, her people had built incredible technology and conquered many worlds. But when had they last helped someone who couldn't benefit them in return? When had a Valthek ship ever responded to a distress call from a weaker species? "Your people have never rescued anyone?" Jae-min asked, sounding genuinely surprised. Bora thought carefully before answering. "We have rescued other Valthek ships, and we've saved valuable allies when it served our strategic interests. but helping primitives. She paused, realizing how harsh that sounded. Helping less advanced species isn't something we do. Why not? It was such a simple question. But Bora couldn't think of a good answer. Because it wasn't profitable? Because it showed weakness? Because her people had always believed that only the strong deserved to survive? Watching the humans work tirelessly to save Valthek lives, those reasons suddenly seemed hollow. These supposedly primitive creatures were demonstrating a kind of strength that Bora had never considered before. The strength to help others, even when it cost them something. As the repair work continued, Bora found herself questioning everything. She had been taught about civilization, progress, and what it really meant to be advanced. Maybe having the biggest ships and the most powerful weapons wasn't the only measure of a species' worth. Maybe the humans, with their strange music and illogical kindness, understood something about civilization that the mighty Valthek Empire had forgotten long ago. After nearly a month of round-the-clock work, the impossible had happened. The Valthek fleet was ready to fly again. Chief Engineer Dongmin stood in the main engine room, watching alien quantum drives humming with power that had been restored through human ingenuity and determination. The massive ships that had been floating dead in space were now ready to jump back into hyperspace. Commander Hak Rim called for a final meeting in his flagship's conference room. The formal chamber was filled with both Valthek officers and human crew members, a sight that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. The commander stood at the head of the table, looking uncomfortable as he prepared to handle something his training had never covered. "Captain Minho," he began formally, "your people have done the impossible. You have restored our fleet when our own engineers had given up hope. According to Valthek law and tradition, we owe you a debt that must be repaid." He activated a holographic display that showed detailed technical specifications. "We offer you quantum drive technology that will advance your civilization by centuries. Your ships will be able to travel between stars in days rather than months." Captain Minho studied the incredible technology being offered, his eyes wide with amazement. This was beyond anything humans had dreamed of achieving. With these engines, humanity could explore the entire galaxy. But then Hak Rim continued. "We also offer territorial rights to 12 star systems, rich in rare minerals. These resources alone would make your species wealthy beyond imagination." More displays showed star maps and resource surveys that represented unimaginable wealth. Additionally, the commander added, "We can provide defensive technology, shield generators and weapon systems that would make your planet untouchable by any hostile force in the galaxy." The human crew members exchanged excited glances. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. Technology, territory, and protection. That would transform humanity's place in the universe. Any reasonable leader would accept immediately. Captain Minho was quiet for a long moment, studying the offers. Finally, he looked up at Commander Hak Rim with a gentle smile. "Thank you for these generous offers," he said politely. "But we can't accept them." The silence in the room was complete. Valthek officers stared in shock, unable to comprehend what they had just heard. Even the human crew members looked confused. "I don't understand," Hak Rim said slowly. "These offers represent more wealth and power than most civilizations see in 1,000 years. Why would you refuse?" Minho shrugged. "Because we didn't help you to get paid. We helped you because it was the right thing to do. Taking payment would make it feel like a business transaction instead of what it really was." "Then what do you want?" Hak Rim asked, genuinely puzzled. "Just friendship," Minho replied simply. "Maybe someday our peoples can work together as equals. That would mean more to us than all the technology in the galaxy." Commander Hak Rim felt something cold settle in his stomach. This response was more disturbing than facing enemy weapons. He'd spent his entire career understanding motivations, what people wanted, what they feared, how to predict their actions. But these humans operated by completely different rules. In Valthek society, every action had a price. Every favor required repayment. Every relationship was built on mutual benefit. The idea that someone would risk their lives and work for weeks without expecting anything in return was not just unusual, it was terrifying. As the fleets prepared to separate, Engineer Bo-Ra made a decision that would change galactic history. Working quietly in her quarters, she compiled detailed scans of the human solar system, their technology, and most importantly, their behavior patterns. But unlike standard military intelligence, her report focused on something else entirely. She documented human kindness, their willingness to sacrifice for others, their strange concept of helping without reward. She recorded Captain Min Ho's refusal of payment and the crew's dedication to saving alien lives. As the Valthek fleet engaged, their quantum drives and prepared to jump back to their home space, Bo-Ra transmitted her files to the Central Archives, not as a military threat assessment, but as evidence of something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that had evolved beyond self-interest. The humans watched the massive alien fleet disappear into hyperspace, not knowing that they had just planted the seeds for a revolution that would shake the foundations of every civilization in the galaxy. The grand halls of the Valthek High Command had never been so quiet. Supreme Admiral Kethvol sat at the massive conference table, reading Commander Hakrim's rescue report for the third time. The silence stretched on as the most powerful leaders in Valthek space tried to process what they had just heard. "This is completely impossible," declared General Yexnol, slamming his fist on the table. "No species in the galaxy behaves this way. These humans must have had some hidden agenda. Maybe they were gathering intelligence or trying to appear weak to catch us off guard." But Admiral Kethvol shook his head slowly. "The report includes testimony from over 300 witnesses, including our own engineers and medical staff. They all tell the same story. These humans risked everything to save us, worked for weeks without rest, and then refused all payment." "It's a trick," insisted General Yexnol. "It has to be. Our entire understanding of galactic politics is based on one simple truth. Every species acts in its own self-interest. Remove that principle, and our whole empire becomes meaningless." Engineer Bo-Ra's detailed logs made the situation even more confusing. Her files didn't just document human technology or military capabilities. Instead, she had recorded hours of conversations, behavioral observations, and cultural analysis that painted a picture of a species unlike anything in Valthek databases. "According to these logs," Admiral Kethvol continued, "the humans share resources freely among their crew. They make decisions based on group consensus rather than strict hierarchy. And most disturbing of all, they seem to genuinely care about the welfare of complete strangers." The implications were staggering. For over 1,000 years, Valthek civilization had been built on the belief that strength came from competition, that only the powerful deserved to survive, and that helping the weak was a dangerous waste of resources. Their entire social structure, their military doctrine, even their philosophy was based on these principles. But if humans could develop interstellar travel while maintaining cooperation and compassion, what did that say about Valthek beliefs? Commander Hakrim found himself at the center of the storm. As the officer who had directly interacted with the humans, he was called to briefing after briefing, forced to relive every moment of the rescue operation. And with each retelling, his own doubts grew stronger. "Tell me again about their refusal of payment," demanded Intelligence Director Zalkes during one particularly intense session. Hakrim closed his eyes, remembering Captain Min Ho's gentle smile. "He said they didn't help us to get paid. He said taking payment would make it feel like a business transaction instead of what it really was." "And what did he say it really was?" "Friendship," Hakrim replied quietly. "He said they helped us because they wanted to be our friends." The room fell silent again. In Valtech culture, friendship was a luxury that only existed between equals. The idea that a primitive species would offer friendship to their obvious superiors was both touching and terrifying. Some Valthek leaders saw humans as a dangerous philosophical threat. If word spread that a species could thrive through cooperation rather than domination, it might inspire rebellion among the many worlds under Valthek control. Slave planets might begin to question why they served their masters. Allied worlds might demand better treatment, but others saw opportunity. What if the humans were right? What if there was a better way to build civilization than through fear and force? What if cooperation could actually make them stronger rather than weaker? The debate raged for weeks, splitting the Valthek leadership into factions. Conservative elements demanded that humanity be destroyed before their dangerous ideas could spread further. Progressive voices argued for careful study and possible diplomatic contact. Meanwhile, Commander Hakrim struggled with his own crisis of faith. He had devoted his entire life to serving an empire built on the belief that might makes right. But he had seen something in those human eyes, a kind of strength that didn't come from weapons or fear. For the first time in his military career, Hakrim began to wonder if the Valthek Empire had been wrong about everything that mattered. 6 months after the rescue of the 7th Fleet, the Valthek Science Directorate was still arguing about human behavior. Half the scientists insisted that Commander Hakrim's report was exaggerated or misunderstood. The other half believed they had discovered something that could change everything they knew about civilization. Dr. Velkar, head of the Behavioral Analysis Division, proposed a solution that would settle the debate once and for all. "We need to test them," she announced during a heated council meeting. "Create a controlled situation where we can observe human behavior without their knowledge. Only then will we know if their altruism is real or just an elaborate deception." The plan was simple but dangerous. The research vessel Quantum Edge would simulate a catastrophic engine failure near Earth's solar system. Hidden sensors would monitor human response while the ship appeared helpless and stranded. If humans truly helped others without expectation of reward, they would risk their lives to save complete strangers once again. If they were secretly calculating and selfish like every other known species, they would ignore the distress call or demand something in return. 3 weeks later, the Quantum Edge sat motionless in a treacherous asteroid field just outside Earth's detection range. The ship's crew had volunteered for the mission, though they weren't entirely comfortable with deceiving the species that had saved their people. Captain Nex Raoul activated the distress beacon and settled in to wait. On Earth, the emergency alert reached Captain So Young while she was enjoying a rare day off with her family. The message was brief but alarming. Unknown vessel in distress, asteroid field designation Alpha 7, possible alien contact required immediately. So Young kissed her daughter goodbye and raced to the spaceport, her mind already working through the challenges. The asteroid field was notorious among Earth pilots, a maze of spinning rocks and unpredictable gravity wells that had claimed several ships over the years. Flying a rescue mission there would be like threading a needle while blindfolded. "Captain, we've confirmed the distress signal," reported her navigation officer as they launched from Earth. "But the ship is deep in the asteroid field. Our chances of reaching them without damage are less than 30%. So, Young studied the sensor readings, her heart sinking as she saw how dangerous the approach would be. The stranded vessel was surrounded by massive asteroids, some as large as city blocks, all spinning and colliding in a deadly dance. Getting close enough for rescue would require flying through gaps barely wider than their ship. "Ma'am, the alien vessel appears to be highly advanced," added her communications officer. "Their technology is far superior to ours. If they wanted to, they could probably destroy our entire fleet without effort." This gave So Young pause. Here, they were risking their lives to save beings who could easily be a threat to humanity. The smart thing to do would be to maintain safe distance, offer long-range assistance, and protect Earth's interests first. But as she looked at the distress signal growing weaker on her screens, So Young made the same choice that Captain Min Ho had made months earlier. Someone was in trouble, and that was all that mattered. "All hands prepare for asteroid field navigation," she announced over the ship's intercom. "We're going in." Hidden aboard the Quantum Edge, Dr. Velkar watched her sensors in amazement as the human ship began threading its way through the deadly asteroid field. The pilot's skill was remarkable, but what impressed her more was their determination. These humans were risking everything to save aliens who possessed obviously superior technology. The rescue took 4 harrowing hours. So Young's crew worked with incredible precision, dodging spinning asteroids and navigating gravity wells, while slowly approaching the stranded vessel. When they finally made contact, they immediately offered medical assistance, food supplies, and safe transport to wherever the aliens needed to go. "Why are you helping us?" asked Captain Nexral, genuinely curious about the human motivation. So Young looked puzzled by the question. "Because you're in trouble," she replied simply. "What else would we do?" Dr. Velkar recorded every word, every gesture, every moment of the interaction. The humans asked for nothing in return. They shared their supplies freely. They treated the alien crew with kindness and respect, even while clearly nervous about first contact with an unknown species. As the human rescue ship safely guided the Quantum Edge out of the asteroid field, Dr. Velkar realized that everything she thought she knew about intelligent life was wrong. The humans weren't pretending to be altruistic. They simply were. Their compassion wasn't a strategy or a deception. It was as natural to them as breathing. The test had been designed to expose human selfishness, but instead it had proven something. Far more disturbing, humans really did help others without expectation of reward, even when it put their own lives at risk. The Great Assembly Hall of the Valthek Empire had witnessed countless historic moments over the centuries, but nothing quite like this. Engineer Bo-Ra stood at the center of the massive chamber, surrounded by the most powerful beings in known space. Her hands trembled slightly as she prepared to present findings that would challenge everything the Valthek believed about life, civilization, and survival itself. "Honored council members," she began, her voice echoing in the vast hall, "my research into human behavior has led me to a conclusion that I know will be difficult to accept. But the evidence is overwhelming, and we can no longer ignore what we have discovered." Supreme Admiral Keith Voll leaned forward in his ornate chair. "Present your findings, engineer. We are prepared to hear whatever you have learned." Bo-Ra activated her holographic displays, showing detailed behavioral analysis, cultural observations, and comparative studies. Humans have evolved along a completely different path than any known species. Where we developed through competition and dominance, they developed through cooperation and mutual support. Where we learned to exploit the weak, they learned to protect them. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the assembled council members. General Yexnol stood up angrily. "This is impossible. Evolution rewards the strong and eliminates the weak. Any species that wastes resources helping others should have died out millions of years ago." "That's what we always believed," Bo-Ra replied calmly. "But the evidence proves otherwise. Humans survived not despite their compassion, but because of it. When faced with natural disasters, they worked together. When threatened by predators, they protected each other. When resources were scarce, they shared rather than fought." She showed video recordings from the rescue operations, highlighting moments of human selflessness. Captain Minho refusing payment, Dr. Sujin working around the clock to save alien lives, Captain So Young risking her ship in the asteroid field. "Their altruism isn't weakness," Bo-Ra continued. "It's their greatest strength. By helping others, they create networks of cooperation that make their entire species more resilient. By sharing knowledge freely, they advance faster than civilizations that hoard information. By protecting the vulnerable, they ensure that every member of their society can contribute to the common good." The implications were staggering. For over 1,000 years, the Valthek Empire had been built on the principle that might makes right. They had conquered dozens of worlds, enslaved countless species, and built their power on fear and domination. But if humans could achieve interstellar travel through cooperation, what did that say about the Valthek way of life? "You're suggesting that our entire civilization is wrong," demanded Intelligence Director Zalkes, "that we should abandon everything that made us powerful." "I'm suggesting that there might be a better way," Bo-Ra replied. "Humans have achieved in centuries what took us millennia. They've developed technology we can barely understand, not through ruthless competition, but through collaboration and mutual support." The council erupted into heated debate. Conservative factions saw humans as an existential threat to everything they held sacred. If word of human behavior spread to the Empire's subjugated worlds, it could inspire massive rebellions. Slave species might begin to question why they served their masters. Allied worlds might demand better treatment. We must destroy them before. "Their ideas spread," shouted General Yexnol. "One small fleet could eliminate their entire planet before they become a real threat." But Commander Hakrim stood up to oppose him. Destroying them would be the greatest mistake in our history, he declared. These humans saved our fleet when they had no reason to help us. They offered friendship when they could have demanded tribute. They represent something we thought was impossible, a truly advanced civilization. They represent weakness, Yexnol shot back. If we don't act now, their infectious ideals will spread throughout the galaxy. The argument raged for hours, then days, then weeks. The Valthek leadership split into two irreconcilable camps. Conservatives demanded immediate military action against humanity before their dangerous philosophy could spread further. Progressives, inspired by Hakrim's experiences, called for unprecedented diplomatic contact and possible alliance. The debate spread beyond the council chambers into Valthek society itself. Citizens who had never questioned their empire's methods began asking uncomfortable questions. Young Valthek like Bora started wondering if there was more to life than conquest and domination. On remote worlds, subject species began hearing whispered stories about humans who helped others without expecting payment. The idea that such creatures could exist gave hope to billions who had never dared dream of freedom. The Valthek Empire, which had maintained stability for centuries through strength and fear, suddenly found itself fracturing along ideological lines. The revelation that compassion could be a source of power rather than weakness threatened to tear apart everything they had built. Civil war loomed on the horizon, all because a small group of humans had decided to help stranded strangers in the darkness of space. 2 years after the first rescue, something unprecedented happened in human history. A massive fleet of alien ships appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system, but instead of invasion warnings, they sent a simple message. We come to learn. Commander Hakrim stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the blue marble that was Earth through the view screen. His hands were shaking slightly, not from fear but from nervousness. He had left behind everything he had ever known, abandoned his position in the Valthek military, and convinced nearly half his people to follow him on what many considered the most dangerous mission in galactic history. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth," reported his communications officer. "Captain Minho is personally welcoming our fleet and requesting permission to come aboard." Hakrim smiled, despite his anxiety. Of course, Minho would be the one to greet them. The human captain who had started this whole revolution was now Earth's primary contact for alien relations. When Minho stepped through the airlock, Hakrim was struck by how different this meeting felt from their first encounter. There was no desperation now, no life-threatening emergency. Just two leaders trying to bridge the gap between completely different ways of understanding the universe. "Welcome to our solar system," Minho said warmly, extending his hand in the human gesture of friendship that Hakrim had learned to appreciate. "We're honored that you came all this way to see us." "The honor is ours," Hakrim replied. "We've come to ask for something that no Valthek has ever requested before. We want to learn how to be better than we are." The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in diplomatic history. Instead of discussing territory or trade agreements, they talked about kindness. Instead of military alliances, they planned cultural exchange programs. The Valthek offered humanity quantum drive technology, advanced medical science and energy systems that could power entire planets. In return, they asked for something much more valuable. They wanted to understand how humans had built a civilization based on caring for each other. Dr. Su Jin found herself teaching Valthek medical officers about bedside manner and patient care. Engineer Dong Min showed alien technicians how human repair teams collaborated instead of competing. Most importantly, ordinary human families opened their homes to Valthek visitors, showing them what daily life looked like in a society built on mutual respect. The transformation was remarkable. Valthek officers who had spent their careers enforcing rigid hierarchies began questioning why rank mattered more than competence. Engineers who had hoarded knowledge to maintain their positions started sharing innovations freely. Medical staff who had treated patients as numbers began seeing them as people deserving of compassion. Engineer Bora became one of the most vocal advocates for change. Working alongside human scientists, she discovered that cooperation didn't make research slower. It made it faster and more innovative. Teams that shared ideas openly made breakthroughs that individual competitors never achieved. I spent my whole life believing that helping others was weakness, she told a joint Human-Valthek scientific conference. But watching humans work together has shown me that cooperation is actually the ultimate evolution of intelligence. News of the unprecedented alliance spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. On worlds that had been conquered by the Valthek, Empire subject species began hearing incredible stories about their former oppressors, learning kindness from primitive humans. The psychological impact was enormous. Other galactic civilizations sent secret observers to study this strange partnership. The warlike Krex Dominion couldn't understand why the Valthek would give away their technological advantages. The Merchant. Zephyr Collective was baffled by humans who refused profit in favor of friendship, but slowly, quietly, cracks began appearing in other empires as well. Young beings from dozens of species began asking the same questions that Bora had asked. Why does helping others have to be weakness? What if there's a better way to build civilization? Captain So Young, now an admiral in Earth's expanded space fleet, often found herself thinking about how it all started. One distress call in the darkness of space. One decision to help strangers, instead of protecting themselves. Such a simple choice, but it had changed everything. Do you think they would have done the same for us? She asked Minho during one of their regular planning meetings for joint Human-Valthek missions. Minho considered the question seriously. Maybe not at first, he admitted, but they're learning. And that's what gives me hope for the galaxy. The rescue of a stranded fleet had become something nobody expected. Proof that kindness could be contagious, that compassion could spread from species to species like a gentle revolution. Across the galaxy, beings who had never questioned the law of survival of the fittest began wondering if maybe, just maybe, survival of the kindest might work even better. The age of cooperation had begun, and it started with humans who simply decided to help.